טוב, מה שלומכם?
מצוין.
מצוין. טוב לשמוע. Good. מפני שביקשתם, דיברנו פעם אחרונה על ה-fundraising, גיוס כספים לעבוד עם תורמים, אז היום אנחנו מדברים על איך לעשות את זה, מה הקונספציה ואיך קצת בפועל לעשות את זה. As you have some slides that'll go with it, some of which you've seen. And I'd like to start with it, and we can go any direction you want. So I'm going to walk through a whole bunch of things, stop me, ask questions, decide to talk about something else. Totally cool. But this is when I think about fundraising, גיוס כספים for an organization. And when I'm talking to an organization, and I'll refer to some actual clients that I work with and some of the challenges, etc. This is actually how I start approaching and thinking of this. And then, the details are fine, but those are so much less fun. That's just like putting into practice some of this theory. So why is this relevant and why are we talking about it? Not least because we talked last time and you're like, I don't know, in your culture, it's not something, and I wanted to help provide a little bit more framework for why it's a good thing to think about and to ask people sometimes for money and support. But also because depending on what you do, and from what we've seen from past alumni from Beit Midrash Harel, they want to do something different. Many, even if they're a synagogue rabbi. By the way, Esther, I have a for you too. This is, I don't know if you want to copy clearly, but yeah. Even if they're a synagogue rabbi or if they want to start a new organization, you've got to figure out how you're going to pay for it, or how are you going to pay for yourself to do the kinds of things that you want to do. And it's actually not about raising money for yourself. It's about making the kind of impact, having the kind of impact you want. Okay, and that's why this could be important to you. And I would say whether you're a volunteer, whether you're someone who gives money, or whether you're someone looking to have that impact, understanding this approach is really important. Okay, so this is my go-to slide, the first one, which is a look at strategy. Okay, because oddly enough, fundraising isn't the thing that comes first. Fundraising should be the thing that comes more towards the end, or somewhere towards the end. What comes first is figuring out, well, what is it you want to achieve? What impact do you want to have? If you are starting a program or running a program, why is this the best way to have that impact? What do you need to deliver that impact effectively? Why is it going to work? Why should someone even be interested in whatever it is you're selling? So it's really important and smart to think about and understand that first. Okay, so to understand, I used the term last time, theory of change. What's your value proposition? I'm working with an organization now. I might have shared last time, but again, I'll share a bunch of. I'm working with an organization called Eitan, okay, which has a very unique way of doing physical training. For people with special needs, primarily people with autism, any ages, but you could say between 5 and 25. And it's a really neat program that brings in, certain training and training techniques, therapeutic techniques, values, community values tied to skill building, etc. And yet when you looked at their materials, it's like, oh, here's an exercise program for kids with special needs. Doesn't really sound as compelling as they really, really are. So one of the things we're doing with them is spelling out their case for giving, why someone should care. And that has to do with what's the problem? How are they going to solve it? What's the reason to think this is a good way to solve it or make a difference? Why are they unique? Why isn't the gym down the road or the program down the road a better solution? And then once they come up with that, how are they going to deliver it? And when you answer those questions, then you're at the point where you can think seriously about, all right, funding. How am I going to come up with the funds to make this happen? How are we going to do that? They did that, by the way, in a very interesting way, but this becomes then the important question.
Tell us how they do it.
So they actually they do it on the one hand in an interesting, neat way, like good way. On the other hand, they don't do a good job at that way. So they have done an annual race every year, okay, called the 8-Ton Run. It happens in the beginning of May. It was postponed several times. And they bring together thousands of people to go race. And it's not like some people take it seriously. Other people walk the course. You could do a 5K or whatever else. And they get a lot of sponsors, corporate sponsors, to do this. That's actually one of the main ways they raise money, which is great. Great way to raise awareness. Everybody feels good, etc. And they've done a really good job getting corporate sponsors. Okay, so on the one hand, that's a really good thing. And I'll actually come back and explain a different way to look at that when we start talking about something called the donor pyramid, because the truth is they primarily raise money from one sort of slice of that donor universe, that donor pyramid out there. The challenge is twofold. The race itself doesn't raise any money. Basically, they pay for the cost of the race out of the money they raise, which you could say is okay. But ideally, when you do something like this, you're looking to raise money to pay for
Are they not
more.
thinking about raising money? They're thinking about just raising awareness?
Great question. They have made themselves feel good that this has been a huge opportunity to raise awareness. But for the organization to continue growing, and they've been growing, they need to raise money. And they are one of the few ongoing races that doesn't actually raise money. And it's because, honestly, they never thought seriously about how to do it. They were really, really successful at getting these corporate sponsors, again, which pays for the race and the activities around the race. Did they ever try to raise money from people running in the race? No. If you look at any of the races out there, Jerusalem Marathon, etc., these are huge fundraising opportunities. Everybody wants to raise money for Rafana healing centers, for Crossroads, for whatever, and it works. They never really thought about it. They didn't have the capacity, the sort of internal ability to really to focus on that, and they realized they need to.
It's weird.
Yes, and I don't mean to talk trash about one of my clients. Maybe we should pause it now. So it's not going to be good for business. No, it's really interesting because again, like the founder who runs the organization was like, I really want to have a personal relationship with all the sponsors who give us money. Okay, great. If you're dealing and raising a lot more money, you can't have a personal relationship with all these, but I want to, and I think that's important. So people sometimes come with, I would say, misguided or misleading perspectives on what needs to be done or how to do it. And that's actually one reason why I want to go through this discussion with you today, because there's actually like a science to this. There are certain things that are more artful, that are more, it really sometimes it's just magic when things work, but there's a science to thinking about fundraising. And so anyway, just to come back, part of where to start is that whole plan. What's the impact? Why in the best position to do so? And once you get to the point where you want to build your program or deliver a program, you've got to now raise money. And so how do you start thinking about it? And there are a couple of ways to do it. Let me just ask, has anybody here actually raised money before? Do tell. How? Doing what? For what?
I've been using the group of people I used to teach and I post the information about what the course I'm raising money for. And I just wanted to be involved in the process of the learning, but not only by attending, but having like an actual commitment. So we raise money for software needs, for like organizational needs, this kind of stuff. It's not a big money, but still. And these people till now, I believe it's a great actually success, like interpersonal success in a way. They keep on asking me, when are we going to raise money again?
It's awesome.
Do you need something else? Like how can we contribute? And that's amazing.
That's awesome. Kol hakavod. Anybody else?
It's like writing grants and getting funding.
Writing grants and getting funding from people who sort of put out there and said they have money that they want to donate to help support a particular cause or approach. One of the things, and by the way, thank you, I think that was a great example. It's part of the reason why I don't think there's any shame in raising money, okay? Because in the best ideal way, you are helping people fulfill their vision, their priorities, their mitzvah of giving tzedakah or helping. And most people who give money actually recognize this, and if you're not their cup of tea, they'll tell you, but okay, they'll say thanks, but no thanks. So it becomes a very healthy thing. And I come back to, Pirkei Avot, in Kemach in Torah, like if you don't have the wherewithal to do something, it's not going to happen.
אני יכול...
Yeah.
סליחה על העברית.
לא, בסדר.
אתה מצטט את פרקי אבות, אם אין קמח אין תורה, אבל אני מודה שאני בהקשרים האלה של הכסף, כל הזמן עולה לי פרקי אבות, אל תעשה את התורה קרדום לחפור. ואני הרבה פעמים אני שואל את עצמי, האם לא עדיף לי להמשיך לעבוד, להתפרנס, ומה שאני עושה בהתנדבות, לעשות בהתנדבות, זה יותר קטן, אבל זה משמעותי ואני עושה את זה כשאני יודע שאני לא מתפרנס מהתורה, מאשר להתפרנס מהתורה, זה לבוא ולקבל איזה כסף. לא יודע, אני מודה שאני מאוד קרוע בדבר הזה.
אני מזדהה מאוד עם ניר.
כן?
אני פשוט גדלתי במערכת, ושכאילו, אני ידעתי כאילו יש אנשים מאוד גדולים בקהילה, שהם יודעים אנשים מאוד עשירים, והם כאילו מגייסים כסף לקהילה, וכאילו מזה מתפרנסים. מי שרוצה אקסטרה, אז כאילו הוא לוקח 40 ומשהו אחוז כאילו לכיס שלו, ו40 ומשהו אחוז כאילו לקהילה במקרה הטוב. וכאילו בעיניי זה לא מגונה, כי כאילו זה אפשר לפי ההלכה, אבל זה שאני יודעת שאני גם אצטרך לתת דין וחשבון על הכסף, כאילו אני הייתי מעדיפה להיות שקופה, אבל מצד שני אני יודעת שכאילו היו לנו קהילות כאילו ממש ממש גדולות, ושהיו להם יותר אוטונומיה, שאם היה איזשהו ספונסר, אז הוא היה חותם על זה שכאילו אני נתתי את הכסף, אבל אתם לא חייבים לי שום דבר על זה. כאילו לא שום דוח, לא שום זה, כי אחר כך זה יכול פשוט להפוך את החיים של הרב לגיהנום, כי הרבנים רוצים שיעשו שלט, שיעשו להם זה או משהו כזה, וגם לא יודעת.
רגע, אני רוצה עוד מכינה בסדר מזה. אחד זה התורה נשמע, שזה מאוד יושב לי. דבר שני זה חוסר תלות.
כן, חוסר תלות.
כשאין לי ספונסרים, אני יכול להגיד מה שאני רוצה. I'm a free spirit.
נכון.
לעומת זאת, אם עכשיו אנשים שמים עליי כסף, אז המשמעות היא שיש לי איזה מחויבות גם כלפי הכסף שלהם, זה אחד שלי כלפיהם, ושתיים, אם הדבר הזה גם ידוע ומפורסם, אז באיזשהו מובן אני גם מייצג שלהם, והם גם מייצגים שלי. יש פה איזה ריליישנשיפ,
נכון.
כן.
שאני לא יודע, שוב, אני לא יודע, אני מציג את הדילמה, שאני מרגיש שזה עלול להיות בעייתי. אז, אתה יודע.
לא, בסדר. שאלות ודברים די מעניינים. אז קודם כל,
אפשר באנגלית, אפשר...
לא, בסדר, trust me, I'll switch. אל תדאג. אני מכיר את הקהילות באוקראינה, ב-FSU וכולי, ואני יודע שיש גברים שמפרנסים את הקהילות, אז זה לא בדיוק, בדרך כלל זה לא ככה, במקומות אחרים, כן, אז, ורוב הזמן צריך למצוא לא רק מאיש אחד או מישהו ספציפי לפרנס את הפרויקט, את הקהילה, את משהו, אוקיי? אבל גם עדיין נשארות את השאלות, כמו שאמרת, אוקיי? How do you work with this? How do you stay clean? How are you not so again, and how are you shakuf? You know, with getting whatever you need to survive, etc. So I'll say a couple of things. Again, I come from the world in North America. It's funny, in North America, there's an organization called the Association of Fundraising Professionals. It's the professional body of fundraisers. And they actually say that it is unethical, okay, for someone to take a percentage of the donations raised, okay? Because they don't think that's transparent. They don't think that's the effective way to run a program and do so in an appropriate way. Oddly enough, maybe no surprise, in elements of the Orthodox community, they don't particularly care, you know, so you have Mishulachim that do exactly that. They come, they take their percent and whatever else. That said, you think best practice, if you're thinking about a project or a program or an organization that you want to build and run, I think it's critically important that you make sure there is appropriate salary, appropriate funding for staff, and that it be very transparent. And I will say that most serious donors, or donors, when I say serious donors, I mean people who take the idea of being supportive of a cause, of a project seriously, understand and believe that, oh, it's appropriate that people get paid appropriately. That's actually the norm in, I think, North America nowadays, and I think worthwhile thinking about.
Even
what
I get
Yeah.
something. I have my brother. He's into business. Let's call it. So he told me that they have a lot of you know. I don't want to call it fake, but I mean, you know, you have an organization. You know, you heard about Mahshbetit.
No, but
So some guy went to collect money for Mahshbetit. They asked him, "What do you need? What do you do?" He said, supposed to say Vayichulu, 2 people at the end of Arvit. So what do you need money? I mean, when I go to raise money, I hire someone to say Vayichulu instead of me. So I need money for that.
Sure.
So he told me if even people who come for these kinds of things, so the donors say, okay, you know, I don't care about the organization. It's somebody came here because he needs money. He left his wife and children and whatever. So, I mean, and he thinks it's, so I will give something. I mean, even if the reason it's not, I mean, whatever he thinks about, put outside the things, the reason. Somebody came here, thinks it's serious, they're ready. He gets what he's supposed to get.
100%. So another story. I was talking with a Chabad rabbi on a serious campus, a serious university in the United States. Big campus, exactly, because I don't want to, even though he's a great guy. Okay, and we were talking, and he was like, you know, I deal with a lot of serious people, and you know, their first reaction is that oh, I'm a Chabad rabbi on campus. There's no oversight. There's no budget. There's no controls. It's not shakuf. So they give me a token gift, okay? Because they're like, I feel like I should do something, but I don't have the faith or trust that this is a serious enterprise. And he's like, and you know what? When I show them that I have a budget and it's very serious and I have clear plans and there's a clear strategy to what we're doing, and I show them, I'll tell you that $1,000 gift that somebody gave me goes to 25,000. Okay. And I think he's 100% correct. You know, if you're able to show that kind of seriousness, it makes a real difference.
Can I add a story?
Please.
So I was part of an organization that still am, that small. And because we were starting, so the founder got a very low salary. And then funders did not want to fund us because they thought, since she has such a low salary, it's not going to continue, right? Like a person cannot exist on that salary for too long. So I don't want to invest in an organization
Well,
that's going to die.
I didn't think about it.
Yep.
Yeah.
כאילו
Totally.
אני חושבת שזה הפוך, שצריך כאילו לחסוך במשכורת שלך כדי לקבל יותר לפרויקט.
Look,
זה מה שחשבנו.
more and more, again, it depends on the environment, and we'll talk about the environment in Israel, which is slightly different, you know, but more and more philanthropists who take the business of philanthropy, like giving money seriously, look at this because they're like, we want to have the most impact possible. And in order to have the most impact possible, you have to make sure you have the right staff. You have to make sure you keep the right staff. You have to make sure they're able to focus on the right things. You have to make sure the organization is doing all that stuff in line. So it makes a difference. And the other thing that I would say is important, and I believe this actually, otherwise I wouldn't be doing this kind of work. It's not about me. It's about whatever the product is. And if you start, let's say, an organization or a project, you may be the best spokesperson, but I'm going to believe that you're doing it not because you want the spotlight and you want to be front and center. You're doing it because you believe in what needs to be done. And you are putting yourself, that's your contribution to making this happen. So when you're asking for support and you're able to show that it's serious and here's how the work gets done and here's how you're going to demonstrate success, it's not about you, okay? It's about delivering on whatever that promise is, okay? At the end of the day, though, okay, you're right. I'm just going to say perfect opportunity for slide 2. Oh, it's double-sided. Oh, it's double-sided. How cool. Yay. I didn't realize we could do that. This whole idea of relationships, which we talked about last time too. I come back to this a lot. Are you raising your hand or you? Yeah, please.
So don't you think that the raising the money and generally managing the charity or managing non-profit organization is very much very similar to running the startup business, like a starting startup business?
Yep, 100%.
And usually what I encountered, it was the issue that people don't want to fund you, not just because they don't believe in your idea, they rather do not believe that you're going to be as an organization to sustain yourself in future. So even though you have a perfect plan, you have like your business plan like planned in a month ahead, that is structurally done properly and detailed and so and so and so. There's a kind of force that holds them back to take a little bit of this risky ride with you. And that's for me, I found this is very, very difficult to overcome.
So I'm going to laugh and say, that's why you hire someone like me to help. But that's the truth is, in that regard, it's just like a startup, okay? And there are some people who take bigger risks in terms of funding a startup. And then there are other ways potentially to fund what you do. And we're actually going to talk about some of those approaches, okay? Because there are different ways to start. The story that I told about Eitan before, this organization, they happen to start with corporate sponsors. and they did a great job with corporate sponsors. It's just not enough for them to grow in the way they need to grow. So they need to expand that. If they were going to be stable and if like they were able to do everything they needed with this, I'd say, great, you don't have to do everything else. You can continue doing a great job with this group because it works. But often you then need to find other sources of funding to get you there. And we'll talk a bit about that. I just want to spend a minute on this relationship slide discussion. I think this is actually a really important way to think about raising money. Okay, and I say that I want to emphasize that even more as I've been doing more and more work with Amutot here in Israel. One of the things that I have found is, I'm also happy to send it to you, by the way. One of the things that I have found is that Amutot in Israel, for whatever reason, I'm still trying to figure out why, approach relationships with donors as a more transactional kind of interaction.
What's transactional?
Transactional means it's just about the interaction itself. It's not about a broader relationship. It's not about a broader timeline. It's like, I need money. I'm going to ask you for money. You give me money. Okay, great. Maybe I'll talk to you next year.
זה כמו בקיקסטארטר אנשים מבקשים...
Okay.
לא,
ככה, yeah.
כן, כמו
So-
בקיקסטארטר.
There was an amazing book about HubSpot. I don't know.
HubSpot. Okay. Yeah.
The story of how HubSpot, the code name,
Okay.
the book, and they told the story that like basically narrows down to the line, fake it till you make it, basically.
Fair. I think it's, I mean, sadly, I actually do believe in that, but in other contexts too, fake it till you make it. But again, I'll go back to Eitan. Eitan actually raised a significant gift from someone last June, July. And when we asked them and said, oh, great, what has been the communication back and forth? They basically said, oh, we sent a note in December. And hadn't yet delivered on what, and my colleagues and I were like, what? Like, how, you're like, but it gets back to this idea that, and I actually think that this is probably driven by the high-tech sales pipeline approach here in Israel, okay, where things are much, much more tachlis, okay? You're on the path to a sale, you're not on the path to a sale. If you're on the path to a sale, did you have the contact? Did you make the sale? Did you close the sale? And you move them into different streams, different silos. The problem is that donors, people don't work that way, okay? And that's where this idea of thinking about your universe of donors as people with whom you have a relationship is, I think, a much better way to approach that.
Then when you see you have a relationship with people, each one looks like a bank.
No, not necessarily. That's
I mean, for sure. I just gave that.
That's a, and I say this. I don't say this in a criticizing way, but I think that's a cynical view of relationships and
People,
dynamics. You know, that I often, with friends, with anyone else, I have an agenda with friends. I'll talk about myself. Like, I'm often like, oh, and it could be an agenda for me. It could be an agenda for them, meaning that I think, oh, my friend Yoni really should be moving in this direction with his career. What can I do? You know, do I forward him messages related to the direction he's going to go in, whether he's interested or not? Do I forward him things I think he's interested in? Do I have a conversation with him about that? It's rare that I have a friend who I have no agenda, I have no interest in trying to move them along or do something particular with them or whatever. I think that's how we live our lives. Yeah.
Yeah, but that actually is based on the one essential key point, your credibility as a person.
Mhm.
Meaning, like, if your friend Yoni, let's say, knows that you're going to benefit some certain way from whatever you offer to him as a possibility for his career, let's say, your credibility is getting lower because you have a direct benefit of that.
True. And by the way, I just on a personal level, if אני נוגע בדבר, I absolutely will share that and upfront about that. Like, I happen to believe that transparency, it may not solve, but transparency addresses a lot of these issues. But if you're thinking in terms of an organization, sorry, yeah, let me dial it back. Yeah.
But I absolutely understand what you said because I spent working in this kind of environment for 8 years, and my primary goal was to build business in Asia, and I built this from scratch for a high-tech company I was working for. And it took me doing a series of completely extreme and unusual things, including bringing sausage from Poland to Indonesia, because the daughter of my business partner loved them so much since they travel. So every single time I knew when there are birthdays, if they had cat or a dog, what the kids like. So you need to be very much personal with the donors all the time.
So 100%. So I want to get there in half a second. I do want to say this whole idea of having a personal brand, I think is incredibly relevant as well here. And I would encourage you not to think of it that everybody's your friend, because they're not, but in your own lives, with your own friends, you've got friends who you're closer with, you know, who you do more for or you want to do more for. You've got friends and family who are farther away, but you still sometimes think maybe before Hagim, you drop a note, you have a conversation, there's still a touch point. And then there are people who maybe you see or speak to once a year, or you present yourself on Facebook and you share an update in a certain way. Okay? That's how we live our lives as individual beings these days. Very similar to an organization, to think about your relationships with prospective people out there. And there are some people who you just drop an update to. There are some people who you want to have a touch point regularly because the more they hear from you, the more you're on their mind. There are some people who, pardon my language, you need to kiss their ass by buying them sausages or whatever else, because you know that that's actually going to make them feel more connected. And I will say as much as possible, like if it's a lishma, if it's for a cause, if it's for this thing you believe in, it's the same thing as if you're doing sales for a high-tech company, except you're doing it for something that's going to add social value, that's going to add real value to society, to whatever problem you're trying to address. But it also practically gets to the whole idea of, and I'm going to be very like particular here, like, all right, you know, where are you present? You know, if you have like if you want to date someone, okay, let's go back to that whole idea of relationship. We're back replaying a little bit the whole relationship slide. But you know, if you want to date someone, you've got to be out there in some ways. You've got to make sure that people are able to learn about you, and you've got to put a good face forward. Once you come up with someone, like, okay, if you meet someone, do you just let things play out as it will? No. If you want to actually go on a date with someone, you usually need to ask. So there needs to be that kind of an interaction, you know, and at a certain point, same thing with trying to get a commitment. Maybe if you're lucky, things happen. I have a great story where things just happened out of the blue, sort of, you know, but meaning in terms of a nonprofit, not necessarily in terms of my dating life, but but usually you need to prompt it. Okay, I'll share.
אני מכירה מישהו, כאילו, מישהו,
Okay.
שכאילו הוא פשוט בן אדם מאוד טוב, כאילו מאוד שקוף, מאוד טוב, די פעיל בפייסבוק, ואנשים כאילו סתם מביאים לו donations. כאילו, באמת, אני מכירה מאוד אנשים, כאילו...
זה גם קורה, זה גם קורה, אבל זה יותר נדיר.
זה מאוד נדיר, אבל כאילו זה בגלל הברנד, זה רק בגלל זה שכאילו, הוא באמת שואל כאילו איך את, הוא אומר מזל טוב, אנשים יודעים שכאילו הוא מבזבז, כאילו הוא מביא את הכסף כאילו למקום טוב,
So there are a bunch of slides here at the end that I'm probably not going to go through, but I had put together for online fundraising and campaigns. What makes them successful? And one of the things that makes them successful is yes, actually asking specifically, making a case why something is urgent and concrete. The vaguer you are and the less specific, the reality is, and this is where there's a science here, the less response you get. I'll also say, but you're right, sometimes great things happen. I, going back many, many years, sort of started the online fundraising program for Hillel. Hillel, largest campus organization in the world, was based in Washington, D.C. We were doing all these communications, and we did a matching campaign. Okay, the chairperson at the time, Edgar Bronfman, said you could use our gift. And it was a good tactic to be like, if you give a donation, someone will match your gift dollar for dollar. Your donation will go twice as far. He said, you could use my gift and do it that way. He was going to give his gift anyway, but we're like, he said we could use his gift. We can announce a match. Okay. Lots of organizations do it, by the way. And there are lots of games behind the scenes with many of these organizations. I got a call from a donor that I had sort of identified who had given at the time $500, and then he grew his gift to $1,000, and then $2,000, and I had been in touch with him. He called me out of the blue, and I remember it because I was actually taking a day off and going to the movies with my dad. And he called me, and again, pardon my language, I feel a little bit midrash. He's like, he said, "Is this another one of those BS matches, meaning it's not a real match? It's just," I said, "Well, Edgar Bronfman said," he's like, "I hate it when organizations do that. You know what? I'm going to give you $25,000 for the match that you can use, and you're going to have to match it. Okay, so that it's a real match out there." Out of the blue, came out of nowhere, frankly, because of cultivation and building a relationship. But that's what can happen if you're lucky and if you're putting out the right vibes. But that's rare.
Does it mean a BS match? Like a
Meaning a lot of organizations will turn to their major donor who's already giving them money and say, "Hi, can I use your gift and call it a match? Pretend it, yes, you're going to give it anyway. But if I put it out there and say to the world, a donor will match your gift dollar for dollar, so we'll be raising even more money if you give a donation." That's what happens with a lot of these matches or challenge grants out there. Okay, so that when I say BS, or when this donor said BS, meaning it wasn't a real match in the sense that there was someone out there giving additional dollars to match new gifts that people gave.
meaning he's going to give the money anyway. It doesn't.
Yes, that's the BS match.
Yeah.
He's going to give it anyway. There's no contingency. There's no real, like, you're not really raising an additional dollar for every dollar you're going to raise from a new donor, even though you say that.
כאילו זה סתם משחק.
Yeah, so it's not.
זה מדרבן, it's motivated.
Yeah.
My grandfather used to be the chief gabbai. He used to sell aliyot. He was a guy who used to always say the numbers, but in the game, but always after Yom Kippur, he used to come with $500. I mean, that's $5,000, the same man. So my grandfather always didn't like when he buys, because he used to get to $500,000. Always, his money he already has. Similar idea.
Absolutely.
לפעמים גם יש כשכאילו אומרים שאתה יכול לתרום לשבתות בקהילה, אתה יכול לתרום לבית ספר יומיים, כאילו...
So that's another, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, in a little bit, but that's also...
או לפצל לתשלומים. יש גם כאלה שכאילו... באמת אומרים שכאילו, אתה תורם באמת כאילו 12,000 שקלים, אם אתה תורם כאילו כל חודש ב1,000 שקלים.
By the way, these are all legit, fair tactics to help raise money. So for many organizations, it makes sense to raise money on a few different tracks, a few different pathways, okay?
Yeah.
One is, oh, here's my organization. it does X, Y, and Z. It's doing great work. Please support my organization. And within that, there are approaches and ways to do it. Okay. You could also say, my organization does this project. This project specifically focuses on girls who need new legs. I don't know where that came from, but okay, great. So now you're going to raise money for the project that's going to help girls get new legs. Like, that's okay as long as it's legit financially, like as long as it's shakuf in that way, and also, you know, transparent. There are multiple ways to raise more money. I'll come back to again and say, the whole idea of thinking about things in terms of a relationship and being a good partner in a relationship, I think is a really healthy mindset, a framework, a lens to use to look at fundraising, okay? And to look at relationships. So let's move on just a little bit. I want to talk about the donor pyramid. Okay, so in the next thing, there's this little pyramid. If we raise more money, we'll get a colored printer so that I could show you the funky colors that are on my screen with the donor pyramid. But basically, this is a way of looking at your audience out there, the donor universe. And if you want to raise money, I'm going to boil it down, even though there are like 6 different levels, I'm going to highlight 3 different segments here.
Go ahead.
Okay. One of which is, let's say, you know, your low tier givers, people who give you a donation, maybe even through crowdfunding, maybe even for a race, you know, or people who like what they see online and give you $18, etc. There's, and I would say those are the 2 bottom levels that we're going to talk about on here. The 2 middle levels I'd call mid-tier. These are people who give you more than stam a gift. Okay.
Because it's you.
Okay. Yes,
Because
actually,
you have nice eyes.
quite possibly. That person who's giving 1,200 shekel or dollars. Okay, it doesn't matter what. All right. Odds are that's not a throwaway gift. That's like real kesef. That's like a real amount of money there. So these are people who are showing that they care in a way more than just a random person who came across you somewhere. People who show that they care are people you want to build a deeper relationship with. You know, these are people who potentially could give more. It's funny, for some people, I deal a lot with smaller to mid-level organizations in the United States. For some people, a $1,000 gift, okay, is going to be their largest gift. And it's a sign that they really care about what you're doing and want to be supportive, but they don't have the means to, let's say, give a larger gift. For others, that's really just like your initial foot in the door. That's your invitation because they could be giving a much larger gift. The only way you're going to find out is by building and deepening that relationship with them and getting to know them a little better.
No, you don't have another way to do your homework?
Oh, you could do, the answer is, so we'll go down a little rabbit hole here. The answer is yes. There's all sorts of data modeling ways to identify who's got more capacity. Okay.
How do you know which capacity have some particular?
When I had my laser surgery, and the eyes, and then somebody came to me to tzedakah because he needs to have a surgery in his eyes, so I gave him more. No.
Okay. I thought you were going to say you had laser eyesight and could see into someone whether they have capacity or not. But there is a way. There are little digression here. Usually with donors, there are 3 things that are required to get a more significant gift. Okay. There's a capacity. Someone has to have the means to give this kind of a gift. There's propensity. Someone has to have behavior where they give these kinds of gifts. People might have money. but they might not give a lot of tzedakah. So like, okay, there's that. And
Doesn't
there's
help us.
also affinity. Are they interested in you? Are they going to be interested in giving to your organization? Those are 3 requirements. There are a few ways you can learn that. There are a lot of companies, talk about high-tech companies. There are a lot of companies doing data modeling and selling nonprofits on these custom algorithms that'll identify which of your donors can give you more significant gifts. Okay? Sometimes that's very helpful if you're doing something like a capital campaign and you need to raise a lot of money, let's say to build a building. I believe that if you are building a relationship with the donors who've already said they're interested, you're going to be able to identify many of these same people as well. And what you're going to need to do to get those gifts is to actually build and deepen that relationship. So it's the same kind of approach. And so that's what I'm going to say are those 2 middle tiers, okay? And the 2 top tiers are what I'm going to call appropriate for major givers, major donors, people who can give much more significant donations. Thinking about starting an organization, okay? A healthy organization might have all of these. And if you look down at the next couple of slides, it actually highlights the percentage of a budget that these types of gifts often pay for, okay? You know, it's the people at the top, the people who are giving you your big, big, big gifts who often cover a larger share of the budget, despite having hundreds of people give you much smaller gifts. Again, it depends. This is just average. But for a robust organization, it helps to have all of these tiers because let's say you've got a major donor who passes away or who's no longer interested in what you're doing. You're going to have to find someone new. You're going to have to raise more. So how do you find those new donors? You get it through the people who are already giving you money and who've already said they're more interested. So that's one way to look at this donor pyramid approach. The other thing is, and this gets back, Mayor, to your comment earlier, you know, where do you start? Like sometimes people have less interest in making that kind of a huge investment to start a new organization. Sometimes that can come from an angel investor and a benefactor. Sometimes that can come from a Kickstarter campaign, which is made up of a lot of smaller donations to get that initial funding to show whatever proof of concept. Sometimes it may be you're going to want to turn to the people you have a relationship with, your friends, and say, hi, I could really use $1,000 from each of you to get this idea started because it's something we've talked about and we all believe in, and I think I can make it happen. And would you make that initial kind of a contribution or investment? Different ways to think about how to start an organization and start building and raising funds, but it doesn't have to be one model, one framework for everybody. It could be very different depending on how you want to start and just how your organization develops. I know organizations for whom I think it makes much more sense for them to raise money from major donors than it does from individual supporters. So I'll give an example. I shared this before when we spoke. I work with a bunch of mainline Christian clergy, okay, looking to advance a very different approach and engagement with Israel and anti-Semitism than is the norm in mainline Christian denominations in the United States. The mainline Christian denominations, Presbyterian, Methodist, even Episcopal, are institutionally now very anti-Israel. Okay, there are reasons for it, from historic anti-Semitism in these churches to, I would say, an overly simplistic or misapplication of things like liberation theology. Okay, another little rabbit hole, liberation theology, something that developed in Latin America actually had roots in like communism, Marxism, whatever. But the idea that it's those who are weak and poor in the overly simplified idea is that it's those who are weak and poor and persecuted in society where that's where justice lies. Justice is on their side. Overly simplistic, but if you take and transpose that to Israel, Palestine, you come away with a denomination that's institutionally very anti a lot of things Israel. Okay? I say that because who are we trying to reach? We're trying to reach Christian clergy. Okay? Christian clergy aren't going to give us money for this. Okay? Most likely the Jewish community that has its own set of issues on an individual basis isn't going to give us money from this. For this, we're going to raise money from people who've got deep pockets, who care about the bigger issues and dynamics on a real macro level. So that's an organization where raising major donors, raising funds for major donors makes a lot of sense. For a lot of other organizations, a crowdfunding campaign might make a lot of sense. So again, different strokes, different approaches, depends on your needs. But that's why it's good to think about all of these elements, all these things that could be built in to raising money. So I want to start just by looking and brainstorming the bottom level. So there are a couple of aspects on the bottom level. Okay, this low end tier, getting smaller gifts. All right. One thing that I want to highlight, even though I don't want to dwell on it, that I also find I'm dealing with a lot of smaller clients, is there are basic annoying things like systems that sometimes need to be taken into account. Oh, if you get a donation, do you have a database? Where do you record the donation? How do you track it? Do you have an online mail platform where you could send out notes?
Like CRM system.
CRM system, exactly. Do you send thank you notes? Who does this? There's a whole area of administration. Yes, Esther does that beautifully and helps enable that beautifully. There's a whole bunch of systems stuff that I don't want to dwell on. I'd be happy if anybody has questions, but I want to acknowledge that it's out there and it's not insignificant, but it just needs to be solved, because if you want to get from people who don't know about you or who you have a contact with and you want to get them to give you money, you know what? You've got to have the mechanism that helps enable that. Okay? But then there's the question of, how do people learn about you? How do they start understanding that you might need money for something important? How do you get the word out? And how do you do that ask? So I'm curious, what are ways that you think that you could do that on a mass level? We've already talked about some, so there's like stuff on the table, but I'm curious, what do you think are
It's
ways?
ChatGPT, and then you're gonna, if it's not gonna stop sending you
Names and contacts? I don't know your experience.
There is a,
not of donors, for people who runs the
There
business.
Oh, okay.
אני הייתי דבר ראשון שואלת מקרובי משפחה ומחברים, כי זה בטוח אנשים שכאילו, אני יכולה להגיד אפילו כאילו שתרמו $10, כאילו אסור לעשות יותר, אבל אם אני אבקש $10, אז זה בטוח שכאילו הם ישלחו את זה וכו'. וגם יש דבר כזה ב-AI agent, וגם יש אוסינט אנליז. זה כאילו כשאתה עושה חקירה של כאילו דאטה, שכאילו גם ברדיט וגם בכל מיני דברים, כאילו זה agent שאתה כאילו מבקש אותו, שהוא יעשה אנליזה בכל מה שהוא יודע, לא איפה שכאילו פתוח. גם בדברים כאלו. כאילו יש אנשים שיכולים לעשות את זה, ואפשר לעשות את זה דרך AI.
So by the way, I love going on digressions, and I think these are interesting. I think AI is great, amazing. I think nonprofits need to do a lot more with AI. To go back to something like a case statement, I wrote a whole case statement for a client with AI in 2 hours that would ordinarily have taken me 10. Okay, just for example, in terms of all sorts of inputs and things like that. And that's not to say it's like, hi AI, just give me what I want. It's like there's a lot of back and forth. You need to give guidance, etc. I think AI is great. I have not had great success with AI in identifying prospects and donors and potential donors. So maybe there are other ways to do it, but that hasn't been my experience until now. It could be that AI could be great in saying, hi, these 50 people gave me money. What should I be writing to them over the next 3 months, 6 months, so that they'll give me money again? Okay.
נשמע קרינג' זה לא...
But AI could be very, very...
לא צריכה להשתמש בזה, אבל זה יכול לתת לך רעיון.
כן.
לא חשבתי על הכיוון הזה.
לא, את צריכה להתחיל. יש לי ארגון למייקאפ לבנות דוברות רוסית. ומי שתורם. ואז תרמו לי ככה וככה. התורמות הם, יש להם ככה וככה. ותראי איך הוא.
יש דרך לגייס כסף שזה לא נשמע קרינג'?
זהו. לי זה קשה, לי קשה, עדיין קשה עם זה, אבל זה... מי שגדל לחרדי נראה לי, הוא צריך דור אחד לצאת מזה.
כן. אבל אני לא גדלתי חרדי.
חב"ד זה לא חרדי.
Look, not that, like, I'm not forcing you to do anything, and I don't want to force you to do anything, but again, where I have found AI to be most helpful are some of these things that also might be cringe-worthy, like writing that kind of a personal... My AI is always like, do you want me to write it for you? And it does a really good job when it does that.
אני נמצא במוצב בלבנון, קר לי, חם לי, לא דואגים לי, אף אחד לא עושה, מישהו בעולם שומע אותי, עזרו לי. להעלות את זה לטוויטר, עם 1,000, אתה קונה לייקים.
Okay, we gotta watch this one. I'm like, okay.
סתם, יש לי עוד דרך שבאמת עבדה, היו לי חברים, כאילו זוג חברים, שעשו חתונה. וברוסיה מאוד מקובל, אתה יודע מה זה אוליגרפים?
מי?
נוברשים.
אוליגרפים. קיצור, הם פשוט כתבו מיילים לאוליגרפים שהם כאילו מזמינים אותם לחתונות, אשכרה.
נו, קיבלו כל אחד $100.
קיבלו, לא מה, $1,000, $500, כאילו סתם. הם יודעים שהם לא מכירים אותם. הם לא יבואו לחתונה בזה, אבל פשוט המזכירה הביאה להם כאילו עוד ששלחו כסף בזה.
למה לא?
ממש מגניב.
טוב, תביא לי את הרשימה.
Okay.
זה...
Okay, so...
קורא להם כסף אחרי מלחמה.
So, besides Mazal and besides oligarchs and, in thinking about raising money, yes, we talked about what is it you're doing? Why is this important? You need to have a good message. You've got to be able to have something that people are going to resonate with. But then you need to think about, how do you get the message out there? How are you communicating? How are you asking? Do you turn to family and friends to do a crowd raising campaign? Do you do a community event like a race? And then how do you keep building on that relationship in a way that you can sustain, like communicating on a regular basis, providing updates about whatever project's going on, etc. The Beit Midrash sends an update at least once a month to our donors and supporters to update them, share what's going on, share the great things that you're doing. We're going to be sharing your Divrei Torah out there too. So those are ways to do that. And then at some point, like, we may ask for your help in terms of sharing with others. Like, here are ways to start spreading the word about giving donations. I do want to say one comment just about, well, I sort of said it before. At the end of this PowerPoint, there were a bunch of tips about how to ask people for money and how to be effective with fundraising. Bottom line, you got to ask. I know some people cringe. One of the things that's like, people respond best to it, and it's when you put an ask out there. There was I might have mentioned this before. I like geeking out on data sometimes. There's a great study that's done every year. It's called the M&R benchmark study that looks at all the different ways in the United States people are raising money online and what works. And they have often done a study. Again, it gets into real detail. There's this term, what's the lifetime value of a donor or a supporter? If someone gives you money, like how do you maximize their support over time? And one of the things that they found is, first of all, if you don't ask them to do anything, okay, donors go away. If you ask people to take an action step, like sign a petition, forward to a friend, send a note to a politician, okay, that gets people more invested and involved, and that helps make them better lifetime donors. The thing that makes them the best lifetime donors is if you ask them for money again. If you're clear and direct and say you've shown your support, won't you make another commitment? Won't you show how much you care about X by making another donation? I say that because the science helps counteract some of the cringing, maybe. Like people respond best to it. But you have to ask. And I say that, I was going to say, a lot of organizations tend to think, and we don't, but it's also worth noting, that when you send a newsletter, when a newsletter updates what's going on, etc., they think, oh, I've sent people something. I sent them an appeal. They should give money. A newsletter is not an appeal. It's not an effective way to get people to give money at all. It's a great way to have a touch point and a way for people to learn about what you're doing, but it's not a way to get people to take that action. And so just interesting to keep in mind. So
what is an appeal then?
an appeal is, and again, I'm not blowing you off, but I'm going to say there's a whole bunch of like
Ask me.
suggestions in the last few
Campaign
pages.
Update. Urgency push. Final
Yes.
push. Thank you.
We need to raise 50,000 shekel in the next week to keep our doors open.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the sort of more extreme whatever. We have an opportunity. A donor has given us 25,000 shekel if we can match it in the next 10 days. Will you show your support? Your contribution will enable A, B, C. So that's a direct appeal. And even though it's not necessarily what you would send to a friend if you're writing to a friend, I would encourage you to think about communications if ever you're in a situation where you're, managing an organization's communications or whatever. The more it appeals like a personal communication, the better. Okay, presumably today everybody knows that everything is fake and whatever else. But I remember also going back to Hillel days. I was the name on emails that went to like 75,000, 100,000 people, okay, on a regular basis. And I would meet people who were like, oh my God, I got your email. I have no idea who they were. I didn't know anybody on this list, etc. But we set it up in such a way that people thought it was me writing them.
זה היה כתוב כאילו, hi, this is Keith from LA.
משהו כזה,
From-
כן. And there are different ways to do it, but I encourage you, and it's not a bad thing. It's like, how do you take this relationship concept and apply it on a big scale?
But it's not fake, people don't...
So what?
No,
So people
זה
don't
עובד,
believe.
זה עובד.
זה עובד?
זה לא בדיוק ככה, זה לא פייק. בגלל שאני כתבתי את המסר, אוקיי, זה היה בקול שלי, אוקיי, אני הסכמתי עם מה שכתוב, וסתם, אני לא הכרתי את מי ששלחתי עליהם, אוקיי? I didn't know them all, but it absolutely was what we were trying to convey. And the fact that I didn't know them personally, okay.
If you know who's the Rebbe, you connected. You know who's the Rebbe, you connected. So
Okay. Just to be clear, Lahavdil. But okay.
Times over the course of a year should you ask
Oh.
for money that way?
So it depends. Aliza, you have asked a question that is very much on the front of my mind right now because I'm dealing with 2, maybe 3 clients that are, I'm just looking at their calendar for mailings. And they're the best I could say is they're very low key. They happen to send an email once every couple of weeks. And if they're doing a campaign, maybe it'll be every couple of weeks. And I think that's incredibly not effective. The rule of thumb that I learned a long time ago is if you have something to say, you should say it. Okay? And even if you have a lot to say and a lot you want to share, even if it means you should send several emails in a short period of time, absolutely go for it. What you shouldn't do is waste people's time or resend them things they've already seen and in that way. So one of the things that it gets annoying in other ways, but one of the things that political campaigns in the United States primarily do exceptionally well online is they will have multiple people from the campaign, including the candidate, send messages to whomever signs up. And they each have a different voice, and they each play off each other. So you are now in the middle of a conversation with multiple people. They all have the same agenda. They're all trying to get you to do something. Okay. But it feels, if it's done well, it feels very organic and real. So you could get a message from the campaign manager saying, hi, we need to get 100 new donations at $18 in the next 3 days in order to meet this deadline. And it's really important. You've shown your support. Won't you make your contribution? You might get a couple of hours later the analytics manager saying, I'm looking to see exactly what our numbers are, and we need to now get this number from this location in order to move it forward. The candidate might send you a forward of one of those messages that then says, I want to make sure you saw this. Mm-hmm. It's really important. If you can help, thank you. By the way, that sort of combination of messages and that kind of dialogue or conversation is incredibly effective until you realize I'm getting dozens of messages a week and then you're done. Yes, but the core supporters, believe it or not, don't unsubscribe, and it works. So for an organization, okay, great, you're not doing it over the course of 4 months. And by the way, sadly, this says more about the political system in America. They don't care if they burn their bridges over it's a 4-month period and then they're done. And everything resets. And they share the names with every other candidate inappropriately. So it's not a good analogy, but if you're an organization here and you've got a campaign, there's no reason. I just wrote a campaign plan last night for an organization that had at least 12 different communications. Now, it wasn't that everybody got all 12. It's that the ambassadors got specific communications to help them encourage their friends. People who didn't open a message got a resend of the same message because they didn't open it. What happens when you get a lot of stuff in your email? If you're busy, do you look at everything? No. If you get something that's resent to you, you might pay more attention. So there are all of these tricks that you can't use too much, but it works. So my rule of thumb would be, I think an organization should be writing every month, every other month at the very least, to its constituents saying, hey, we want to let you know what's going on, and should probably do 3 or 4 campaigns a year. And those campaigns are a more intensive couple of weeks of doing stuff. Okay, that would be my recommendation. But anyway, presumably you're successful, all this information gets out, you've got a whole list and an audience, etc. And now you can look and see, let's talk about the next 2 tiers. What do you do with these people? How do you move them up? What are ways to do that? So you could look and see who's given you multiple donations, who cares about you more, who's showing more investment in that relationship. Because of interaction, because you know them, or because of the size of their gift. And in that case, you want to do something a little more special for them. An event, maybe. A giving society. A lot of organizations say, okay, we What?
merch, how to say?
You could do merch. Merch is a great way to
What's the giving society?
well, so merch and swag are really, really cool. And that's also a good way to transactionally get people to give you a little more. Really cool. Great idea. A giving society is so you now want to take these random individual donors who are giving it at a certain level or in a certain range. You might want to bump them up a bit. You want to make them feel more connected and tighter. So you could create a special friends circle. You could actually label it, you can brand it in a particular way and say, great, for donors at 1,000 shekel or more, for donors at $1,000 or more, you could join our special friends society. As a member of the special friends society, you know, you'll get extra VIP updates and messages, and you'll know that your money is doing even more. There's a way to create this esprit de corps, this sort of group dynamic where people look and say, oh, you know, maybe I've been giving like $500, but there's this tier and it kind of sounds good and I'll feel even better if I do it. So I'll give a little more so I could be I could be a special friend. That's what I mean by a giving society. And organizations do it in all sorts of different ways. There's let's call it a weak version of that, which is basically you just have a label and maybe you send them a particular message or a branded thing that says, thank you for being part of this special friend society. And you know what? It's good, Diana. It works. Some organizations take it even more. Great. You get a special call if you're a member of the society with the CEO, you know, or you get a special thank you call from someone in the organization, or you get a special executive update communication that makes you feel even more special. And the more special you feel, the more likely you are to give more. So that's how that works in this mid-tier level. And you want to do things like that that continue to grow people who are giving more significantly. And the more people you have who give at this level, first of all, it adds up. It adds up faster than $18 gifts, 18 shekel gifts, whatever. And you're right, monthly giving is a tactic that actually has been proven. If people give monthly versus once, the average gift during the course of the year tends to be higher. So, because people, like people's brains sort things differently. You know, if somebody looks and says, I can give 18 shekel a month, great. But if they gave once, maybe 180 shekel would be a stretch. But 18 shekel a month, easy. And over the course of the year, you've now increased their gift 20%. So there are all sorts of tactics in there. Lastly, you got the upper tip of this pyramid, which is people who can give more transformative, more significant gifts. Often they'll give to something targeted. I want to support this program. I want to be the major benefactor of this program. You submit a proposal, you do a foundation grant, because foundations sometimes give at that level. So it's worthwhile to know and think about whatever the work you're doing with the organization, how you can package that and sell that in a way to people who can give you more money. I know, you know, going back to the Chabad guy on campus.
Beep.
Yes, Beep, on Beep campus.
Beat?
Meaning I didn't
say the
I didn't say which campus.
Oh,
I'll say which campus. I don't care. It was Princeton, but whatever. He does a great job. So basically, we went from, you know, someone giving Stam $1,000 because he asked, to him showing he's serious and credible, etc., where someone then is willing to give a $25,000 gift. That same person, he's approached and said, we need to start this special women's learning program. Again, I made it up now, but it doesn't matter what, or the special Shabbat program. And I need $100,000 in order to fund this program. And here's what the results are going to be. Do you think he's going to get that $100,000?
Okay.
Quite possibly, yeah. From the person who just gave him $25,000. Because he was able to come, he was able to show that he was legit, that he was delivering results, that there was a concrete plan, and he's able to say, here's how we can extend that impact, and here's how you can have even more impact. So these are ways that people approaching fundraising look at and say, how do we help deliver on, this strategy of an organization? Okay. And there are different ways to start. I'm a big believer you can't do everything at once. So if you're starting an organization, it makes sense to be thoughtful and strategic. Where are you going? What is it you need? And where is the most likely way to raise it? Over time, you could expand, and there are tips and techniques to be more effective. Again, the last several slides here, even though it talks about online fundraising, it's relevant no matter what. Like, oh boy, I'll tell another story. It's not a great story, but whatever. I got a call from, well, a friend threw me under the bus, actually. A friend who I knew growing up, who lives in Lakewood, referred the son of one of my early Hebrew school teachers, one of our early Hebrew school teachers, to me. The son is raising money for mikvot, okay, all over the place. And he said, it's our Hebrew school teacher's son. You should really talk to him. No idea what it was about. I just said, okay, look, this person was very special to me. I want to be helpful. I had this conversation. I'm listening to the son. First of all, the son went on and on and on and on and on. So for the first 40 minutes, I had no idea why I was having a conversation with this person. 40. I was driving, so I had nothing better to do anyway, so it worked. But and finally he got around to it. So point number one, sorry, even though it says on the online thing, get to your ask quickly, it's not just online. If you're soliciting someone, if you're talking with someone, you want to be clear. Why are you having a conversation? It should be clear up front what you're trying to do and what your message is.
I need money.
Okay. So mind you, after that, he's looking, then he says to me, I'm looking for significant gifts. And he starts talking to me about the amount. And then he also says, because he's a fundraiser in Lakewood, says, I usually only make 11 to 15% of a gift, which in the scheme of things, not so bad. It's transparent, etc. Maybe because I'm not in that world, didn't sit well with me. I'm like, oh, that doesn't make me want to give you more money. And then the case that he made for why I should be supportive totally fell flat. Fell flat. It did not only it didn't speak to me, I didn't believe it. And it totally turned me off. I didn't want to give money, actually. And it was like, oh, you've just made all the mistakes that we just sort of like talked about trying not to make. And it was, I sort of felt bad. At the end, I basically said, look, any contribution I could give you is going to be so infinitesimally small as to be irrelevant. So I'm sorry, I'm going to pass. Okay, that was my conversation, my attempt to be polite and whatever else. But I was just like, I walked off, I got off the phone and I was like, never. I was like, I felt bad because not that I would have been supportive otherwise, but I was like, this could have been much smarter and much better and much more targeted and okay. I wouldn't have used those examples. It gave the wrong message, and
What made you flat? But what was the thing that made
that I reacted poorly to? Look, it was ironic. I was back in America. This is actually somewhat recently. The Shabbat before, I was in Mitzpeh Ramon, driving. I was there for Shabbat, so I was driving through the Negev. There's the big Air Force base down there, etc. Lo and behold, I got a whole story how he's looking to build a mikvah on the Air Force base.
Mm-hmm.
And he told me the whole story about how these wonderful women who are supporting their husbands, the pilots, and looking to do what they can. And there's not a mikvah on the base. They have to drive through Bedouin villages, through danger, in order to find a mikvah. Okay, again, I was just literally the week before driving some of the same roads by Mitzpeh Lamon and whatever else up north. Like you can't get through these roads, and he went on and he just embellished, and I was sitting there thinking to myself,
He doesn't know what he's talking about.
I just don't believe you. And
I mean, he doesn't know either. Probably would have told him, you know.
so okay, but
script.
but that also gets to, that's the kind of thing you don't want to do. And why,
Mhm.
again,
But the-
coming back to what
If you didn't live in Israel, though, you would probably believe him.
you might, but it gets back to the whole transparency thing, and it gets back to the whole relationship. Look, sorry, not to give you another whatever. There's a whole other. He gave another example.
תכלס יכל להגיד אחרת, הוא יכול להגיד שכאילו, וואי, איזה כיף, כאילו זה היה יכול להיות בשביל נשות מילואימניקים, שהם היו יכולות כאילו לא לבזבז את הזמן שלהם, ושיהיה להם מקווה מגניב, כאילו רק בשבילם.
100%. There were plenty of things he could have said.
אבל מה שבטוח, שהוא האמין שמעניין אותך מקווה.
זה מה שבטוח, לא, מה שבטוח, הוא חשב שמפני שאני מכיר את אמא שלו, אז אני אהיה מוכן להקשיב לו. אז ככה. So, look, I hope this was interesting. I hope this may be helpful at some point. I'm happy to answer any questions now or later, but I wanted to share, for a couple of reasons, some of the practicalities about raising money for organizations, but also to show that there's a science there, but it's not rocket science. It's doable, it's accessible, and this is actually a great way to do good. Like, so if you are thinking about doing something or starting something that you think will have an impact, there are ways to make that happen, and it's actually a very good thing. And people who give tzedakah and take it seriously actually appreciate the opportunity. So, happy to talk about anything, any questions, any.
Can you give us an example of where, like, you have to tailor your message? Like, let's say somebody wants to fundraise for Harel. So there are a lot of things they could say. They could say there are men and women there. They could say that it's a different kind of study. It's also very מחשבה, philosophy-based, right? Like, how do you figure out how to tell the story?
So, great question. I think that coming back to the value proposition of the organization itself, first of all, maybe you're dealing with an organization that literally has one topic and one focus, and that's what that is. But usually there are a couple of different descriptors, a couple of different things that signify an organization. So at Beit Midrash Harel, you have men and women learning together to get smicha together. So that's one topic. Presumably, there's also a slightly different approach to learning and different kinds of focus areas or hadgashot, like emphasis for the learning that takes place. There's also then the environment, the people, the alumni, the teachers, etc. So there are often several different things that define an organization. You sometimes don't know until you start talking to someone what's going to turn them on the most. So for Beit Midrash Harel, I mean, I'll say clearly, we look for people who care about, in the Orthodox world, the halachic world, who care about women's issues and men and women learning and doing things together to have a conversation with them. But there are some people for whom they may care about that, but there are some people who are like, no, I like Rabbi Hefter's philosophy. He's got a very different approach and take on how to address different issues. And that's the benefit when you have a solicitation, when you ask someone for money. Okay, one, maybe or hopefully it's not the first time you're having a conversation with them. You know, so go back to this guy from Hillel that I mentioned, that I saw when he gave 500 and then he gave 1,000, and then I had a conversation with him to thank him and say, really appreciate it. And in that conversation, I'm able to learn more of what he's interested in, such that, and again, he took the opportunity away at that time, but like such that when you want to then ask he or she for money, you're able to then focus in on a particular area and lead into that. But even if not, even if you're having a conversation, you could see what they're interested in. It's always good to have opportunities in your back pocket.
Right. But then when you look at the website has to have a kind of a clear message, right?
The website has to have a clear message. Your communication should have a clear message. It should be reinforcing that message. I'll come back to Eitan and the race. And again, we sort of began working with them much later on, but they had nothing related to fundraising with the race, okay? We got them to add in an opportunity for people to make a contribution, and I sent a WhatsApp, etc. But it was very wussy. It was very low key. It was not a very strong ask. In an ideal world, you're able to talk about the amazing work of a program like Eitan, and to say something like, your contribution makes this happen. Please support us today. Something like that is good messaging that doesn't take away from anything else. All it does is it opens a door. And for better or worse, people don't think about making a contribution or whatever until you open that door. I'll give another silly example here in Israel that actually bothers me. Tips. Many people don't leave tips here.
לא, אבל
Any?
יש אנשים לא משאירים טיפים.
לא, כי גם החוק פה מוזר בנושא.
Okay.
בצרפת גם לא, וביפן גם לא.
מה?
Okay.
לא בסדר, אנחנו פה.
But my point isn't about whether or not people should tip. My point is the places that actually have something mofia that actually says tip not included, or please tip your servers, or have a nice sign or something with a tip jar, you get more tips than if there's nothing there. And certainly more than if there's like a folded over like plastic cup with like cartoon print on it. So asking, just putting it out there opens a door and makes a difference. And that's what I think about fundraising. You're inviting people to join you and to make a difference.
Like in America, when the receipt comes, you could write your tip in.
Yes.
And they don't have that here. It
No,
was a noise.
actually, I don't understand why like tabit, whatever.
Oh, in Tabit, I think you can.
Yes, wait, tabit.
ביט, טוב. ביט.
אוקיי, אבל אם אתה משלם למשל באיזה בר או משהו כזה, סתם, אין אופציה, לעשות את הפלאפון, לשים שירות, אין אופציה, חוץ מאם אתה מבקש, או להגיד בראש.
Then you have to tell the person how much you're tipping.
Because the law, the problem is that החוק לא מכיר בזה. יש בעיה, בארץ המס הולך מהמעסיק.
אני רושם.
ויש פסיקה שהטיפ שייך למעסיק, והוא צריך לשלם את זה. אז אתה נותן את הכסף, זה הולך למעסיק, אז למה שנותן? לא, זה בעיה חוקית.
כן, נידין. אז טוב.
שכוייח.
תודה לך.
לחיים, מתי ג' תמוז? לא יודעת.
חודש הבא.
תמוז.
אותו ג' תמוז, לחיים, אפשר להתחיל לכתוב.
מה זה ג' תמוז?
ג'.
ג' תמוז.
Leadership. We're doing the leadership one next week.
Great. Do you want them to come prepared with that next week?
I'll let you know later.
Okay. I think you're totally right. For some of these like smaller things, I'll say hello.
Okay, wait, why am I?